They say if you eat your vegetables, that it will go well for you. That's what we're talking about today, because today is the fourth commandment in our sermon series called The Standard, where we're looking at all the 10 commandments here. And today we're focusing on that fourth one, which is honor your father and mother. I know some of you think it's the fifth, and that's okay. But we're talking about honor your father and mother today. And this one I hear, because I don't have any children, but my friends that do, this commandment always gets new life breathed into it whenever you become a parent. You're like, that's right. Honor your father and mother. That's what you got to do. You know, that's what all these kids have to do, like that. But today, we're going to look at a different facet of this. Like, what does this commandment actually mean? And does it mean just honor your father and mother? And to what extent do we honor them? That is what we're talking about today. What does all this mean? And I think we end up seeing a beginning breath of what it means when we look at Ephesians chapter 6, beginning with verse 1. It says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, is what he says, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Ooh, a promise attached to the commandment. That's what we're talking about today. What I think is interesting about this commandment is I have a lot of years underneath my belt now, a lot, you know, it's a relative term. It's about 9 years of teaching the 10 commandments. I always discover new things whenever I am teaching the commandments here. And there's something that always tends to be like a through line in the commandments, is that the way people accept the commandments is always different. Like, people of a certain age, you know, kind of an older persuasion, when you start talking about the second commandment, you know, you shouldn't take the Lord's name in vain, are always throwing back at me. It's like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? But it's interesting that this one, the fourth commandment, you know, honor your father and mother, in confirmation classes with 7th and 8th graders and, you know, that age range, I always get tons of whataboutisms on this one. You know, like, Pastor, what happens if this is the case? Or what happens if that is the case? And I'm not picking on one or the other, but typically they'll be like, oh no, it's like, honor your father and mother, but what does all this mean? You know, like, what if my mom or my dad tells me to do something illegal? You know, how do I honor them then? What if my mom or dad are abusive? You know, how do I honor them? What if they are just plain awful and make my life absolutely miserable? How do I honor them? You know, if those are the cases, can I just kind of do my own thing then? All right, so what does this actually mean to honor your father and mother? So let's actually go back to the source and we can see where we actually got the 15 commandments.
The Lord Jehovah has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
Oh yeah, the 10 commandments. So in Exodus chapter 20, it says, honor your father and mother, and here's the key, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord our God is giving you. Notice that it says an actual promise that is attached to this. Do this and your days will be long. There's not many other extra phrasing along with the commandments. There's just like the third commandment, which is remember the Sabbath day. And that one says, remember the Sabbath day because you remember that I, the Lord your God, have pulled you out of Egypt, that I freed you from slavery, that I brought you into rest. Right? Remember that when you remember the Sabbath day. And now he's doing something else. He's saying that honor your father and mother, your days will be long. And I hear every parent right now saying, that's right. Do what you need to honor me so that your days will be long. Right? Your days will be long in the land that I'm going to give to you. And I think it doesn't just extend to this fourth one, but that idea extends all the way to the end of the commandments now, that we are doing things that are foundational for us living with our neighbors and understanding how to live better with them. Yes, this is the only commandment with a promise. And Paul picks up on that promise from Ephesians chapter 6 when he says, honor your father and mother, and it will go well for you. It will go well for you. It's almost like that it's establishing something that is part of the creation itself, that God's weaving of the fabric of creation is saying, hey, put your attitude and mind into this, and it will go, your life will just operate better, that it will go well for you. And that's the key, because I think we learn something foundational about living with our neighbors in a community, in the creation, all around the world with us, when we are children, about honoring our father and mother that will serve us past childhood on into being adults, so that it would go well for you. So let's get into this now. Let's see how the Apostle Paul, writer of the letter to Ephesians, understands the fourth commandment. Now, when you read Paul, it's really tempting for us to just take like one or two verses out of context and go, this is what God wants me to do. And we can get a lot from that, but I don't think it's helpful, right? So what we need to do is actually look at the context for what's going on. Paul is obsessed with unity of the body of Christ, unity of the body and forgiving of sins in order to get there. And what we end up seeing in the direct context of how he understands honor your father and mother is he starts talking about relations to our direct neighbors. And he starts talking about husbands and wives, children and parents, and then like slaves and masters, and basically like how the neighborhoods work around us. He begins talking about all this. So right before what we're going to read here in a second, he talks about husbands and wives. And he says that you are to love one another, you are to serve one another, just as Christ loved and served his bride, the church, which is a high bar, right? And that's almost like a selfless love. Right after he finishes talking in that, he doesn't take a break. Our English translations change the chapter, which I think is unhelpful here, but he doesn't take a break. He goes right from love your spouse like Christ loved the church all the way to this. Children, obey your parents as to the Lord, for this is right. And then he quotes the actual commandment. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. Remember the promise talk? That it may go well with you and that you may live long in the Lord. So children, obey your parents as to the Lord. So as we see here, children are to keep and maintain their relationship with their parents as they do also with the Lord. But let's be honest with ourselves. What does it actually mean to honor someone? Does it simply mean to obey them? I don't know. That doesn't seem right to me. Does it mean to love them? I don't know. Honoring's a difficult thing. And when we start thinking about it, a lot of whataboutism starts. And I think Luther helps us here from his large catechism. And I have a reading from it, and it's from paragraph 106 in our section of this today. So you can check it out with me if you would like. It says this: for honor is a much higher thing than love. For honor includes not only love, but also respect, humility, and awe directed toward a hidden majesty of theirs. I really like how he defines that. Basically what he says is that we need to honor and recognize God in how he has set up the creation and how he has set up patterns of order all through the creation. And there are all these children-parent metaphors all throughout the creation. And we know what he's talking about here. He's talking about how we recognize that God is over all the creation, and we recognize that by having the vertical element. And he's saying that that same pattern is with all these people around us. They're like parents type of thing all around us. So who is that? Well, of course, it's our parents, mom and dad, but it's also pastors and teachers. Got to get the pastor one in there. But it's also government officials, Caesar. But it's also our boss. And I mean, when you start thinking this way, you can just start clicking off the list. Like, oh yeah, that's this person, that's this person, that's this person. It may change and modify as we go through our lives, but it's always this kind of metaphor. And we see that God is orchestrating all of this. And that when we recognize it, then it will go well for us. And right about now is when this always gets really difficult on us. I mean, this is usually when I'm teaching confirmation, when all the students start doing all these whataboutisms. It's like, what about this? What about that? And that makes complete sense, because we're turning over the power of the world and seeing the power of the gospel, the power of God's creation in there. And we begin to do all these whatabouts. What about my boss and how he's terrible? He's no good in the job. I mean, he doesn't really know what he's doing. I mean, I know more than her, you know? It won't go well for me if she stays in charge. I need to be in charge of all of this. Or what about that politician? What about all their policies? Or should I say their lack of policies? It can't go well for me if they stay in charge. Or what about that pastor that you disagree with? Wait a second. I mean, he doesn't really make things go well for me at all, right? And what about Caesar charging all of those taxes on me? Read our gospel lesson from today. It would go so much better for me if I had all that sweet tax money in my own pocket. And we start making up all these reasons why we shouldn't honor them, saying that it will go better for us then. And when we say these things that we can't honor this person for this or that reason, we come to this point. And when this was presented to me, my whole understanding of the 10 Commandments basically changed overnight. That I realized that I break all of them all the time. And the phrase I'm about to tell you is one that will pertain to all of the commandments after this. That it's essentially this: when we come up to all these whataboutisms, what we're essentially saying is that, God, I'm not happy with the way that you have created the world, and I need to fix it. And in that moment, we take God off the throne, especially the throne on our hearts. We take him off of the throne and put our own selves, we deify ourselves and go, this is how it needs to be done. This is how the creation needs to be done. I've gotten the terrible leader off of it, which is God, and I've put myself there and said that this is the way. I am it. And every time we say something absolutely demeaning about someone who would be in that kind of upper echelon above us, we are claiming to be God above them and telling the true God that he doesn't know what he is doing. The amount of small self-proclaimed gods that is in the world today, and I can attest to that myself. We can see them all the time on Facebook and social media, but we can see that everywhere that we go is astonishing, where we are presenting ourselves as one that needs to be venerated and worshiped, rather than how God has made us to be the servant ourselves. We think that we have to take control in order for it to go well for us. But I think we see that Paul and Moses, who are both being inspired by God, who gave us the commandments, are saying that when we honor, when we lower ourselves, when we become a servant, then it will go well for us. And if I'm honest with myself, I fail at this each and every day. So much so that it's sobering, that even though when I know this fact, I constantly go back to my old way, where I think that if I can just take power by demeaning those that are above me, then it will go better for me. But we see that the Creator's way is that by lowering ourselves, it will go well for us. I think this is what that letter to the Ephesians is all about. The author, Paul, is reminding us, remember what Jesus the Christ did and what he does and how he's become a servant. So husbands and wives, love yourself like Christ did. Become a servant to one another and it will go well to you. Parents and children, remember what Christ has done and become a servant and honor each other and it will go well for you. Servants and masters, remember what Christ has done and lower yourselves and it will go well for you. Because we think that by taking power and demeaning those that are above us, that it will go well for us. But we see the Creator's way is that by lowering ourselves, it will go well for us. And we see that this is what Jesus does, because Christ lowers himself and honors the Father. And this whole idea about Jesus going to the cross is filled with all kinds of difficult language. Like, you see so much language about how God sent Jesus to the cross, or Christ went willingly to there, and it's hard language. And I'm not sure how I feel about it, especially with talking about today, because I don't think it quite says what we wanted to, and it makes God out into a character that I don't think we want to have. What we see is that God became the creation, became human, became his own image. And he then lowered himself, not raising himself to the high places, but lowered himself to the point where he died and died on a cross, so that we would not be far away from him, so we would not be banished away from him, but instead he lowered himself so that he could be close to us. And God became part of our creation in Jesus and lived out the kingdom and the creation's purpose. And look at all of us here, that it would go well for him, that he would be able to be close with us, even when we are messing up. And we are going to mess up. We're going to mess this up all the time. Where we're going to encounter people who aren't worth being honored. We're going to encounter people that hurt us deeply. We're going to encounter people that are just selfish and narcissistic. We're going to encounter all of those people, and we are going to struggle in honoring them. But in those times where we struggle to honor and we can't do it and we can't live up to this commandment, Jesus lowered himself to the point where he died on the cross to be near us. Jesus lowered himself so that he could honor us. So may you go forward this week with eyes open to see how Christ works in the world today, to see who you can honor, that it may go well for you, that it may go well for us, that it may go well for the whole creation, because that's what Jesus did. He lowered himself and even honored a sinner like me and one like you. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.